right. Welcome back to the podcast today. We have a very special guest, Chase Tuning, who I've been on your podcast now, I think 3 times. So this
At least twice.
Yeah, this feels very weird to be in this chair interviewing you and kind of getting all the information out of you. But a little backstory maybe on like who you are, what you do.
Yeah.
Let the listeners know kind of what your story is.
So my backstory with you is I wanted a friend when when I moved to Southern California.
No friends.
So when my wife and I moved here, coming up on next month, 2 months will be 5 years. Crazy enough. Mm-hmm. And we started off down in Laguna, and I was just on the gram as one is looking for. I was looking for food. I was looking for gyms. I was just kind of trying to build my new daily life. Mm-hmm. And I think on the Explore page or something, I looked up like #fitness Laguna or something. And there was the Sam Plan doing her thing. And I just loved your vibe and your energy. And turns out you were then training at the gym that we wound up becoming members at. Mm-hmm. And so that's like a cool little backstory to us.
And prior to that, you had been in the military. You were living in West Virginia. You'd started in DC. You'd started your business there, I presume. Mm-hmm. And was it your business that drew you to LA? Was it the lifestyle? Was it the sunshine?
Can I say yes to all the
above? All of them?
Yeah, it was honestly the move to LA, the move to California has worked out tremendously for me. And I'm so happy and fulfilled. And it's been an amazing opportunity and challenge, but growth for everything that I do. But it wasn't for me. It was actually for May, my wife. She wanted to go to grad school. She was a nurse, wanted to become a nurse practitioner. And she just strategically only applied to USC and got in and had a really enticing offer. So we packed up our car with what we could fit in it, us, our small dog, and sold everything else, our furniture, our life back in Washington, D.C., and just made the trek west. We wanted a fresh start. She was going to continue her education to kind of level up in her career. I, at that point, for about less than a year, really, had begun my own thing. Mm-hmm. And my own thing was running a health and wellness podcast, Everforward Radio, and running an online health coaching company, Everforward Coach. Mm-hmm. And before that, I was in clinic every day for about 4 years at that time. I was a clinical health coach. That's what I went to school for. My bachelor's in exercise science, master's in health promotion with a concentration in nutrition, ACE certified health coach, TRX certified suspension trainer, and I forget the other, some kind of group fitness, I think. So, all the things like a health and fitness professional does. Mm-hmm. You think you got to get all the letters after your name and do all the things. But I wound up working with patients, as we call them, because it was in a clinical model. Mm-hmm. And so I would work with people to, do exercise physiology testing, lifestyle, behavior change, weight management, work with them and their doctors to get them off of medication, to help prevent medication, or to mitigate risks that they had based on, metabolic panel, based on family history, based on just traditional allopathic care. Mm-hmm. Then they would come see me and my team of coaches. Mm-hmm. And so I was a coach there. I was a wellness director for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So I ran the whole wellness department and still saw patients every day, but then managed anywhere from like 7 to 9 other coaches and offices kind of up and down the whole East Coast. Even for a little while, we had offices in Chicago and Seattle. So it was great. I loved it. It's what I went to school for. It's what lit me up personally. Mm-hmm. And I had a passion for it. And it was just so cool to see that this could be a thing. I don't know about you, but I always had this dream of, I wish I could go to a doctor and get well if I need to get well, if I have an acute injury or illness, or get my labs, physical every year, but then work with somebody, them or somebody else, to go, all right, here's everything else. Here's the nutrition. Here's where you are in terms of, getting a baseline fitness test, exercise physiology testing, strength training, understanding what makes me tick and what I'm navigating in my personal life and my physical life. How can I bring all that together? And so it was a dream come true for me, but
then May got her position here, right?
Yeah.
And then that's what drew you away from that. And it seems like, 80% of your career was in that health fitness space, coaching or, working with patients. At what point did that ratio transition from 80% to what it is now?
Spring 2019, I'll never forget. It was a very
Okay.
specific moment where I had to decide, where I chose to decide to just pick one thing. So at that time, early 2019, I had been running the podcast for a couple of years, at that point, like 2 years. And it was growing, and I'd already begun to monetize it. I also was running my own health coaching practice. I had a team at that point of, I think, 6 or 7 other coaches underneath me. So I'd grown it, invested a lot of money into growing or developing this app basically.
Yeah.
And so both were doing well, and both were at a point where I needed to choose, all right, are you going to be able to commit to them both? Are you going to be able to scale them both? How can you grow them and you at the same time? And like I think a lot of us do in the space, I got help. I hired a coach, a business coach who knows the fitness coaching space very well. And Sam, like the first phone call, I tell the story all the time. The first phone call, maybe first 15 minutes, he stopped me and goes, Chase, we're not going to scale your coaching business, which I hired him to do that. I paid thousands of dollars and was just committing to this because I want the growth. I want to grow the coaching. I want more success. I want to leverage that into other things. And I know that he's my guy. And he's like, Chase, you won't stop talking about the podcast. You won't stop talking about all these other things that happens around this, the microphone. And he goes, we're not going to grow your coaching company. You're gonna choose right now. I'm gonna say choose the podcast, and that's what I did. And then so I basically paid him a lot of money to not do what I thought he was gonna do, but he did help me in a lot of other ways and many other next steps for what I'm doing now. And ultimately it was that permission that I needed from somebody else to see something in me that I was maybe too afraid to say out loud or to take action on. And so I hung up health coach Chase hat in 2019 and just poured everything into the podcasting space. And so my show and my content is still very much centered around health and wellness, but so much more. Personal development, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being is kind of like the catchphrase now. I say for Ever Forward Radio, living a life ever forward.
Yep. How much of moving to LA do you think played a role in your current mindset and even your daily habits and all of that?
All of it. I know this might sound like a cliche kind of typical LA answer, but
I love those.
But it's so true. It's so true. Being here now for about 5 years, it's just been the most demanding, the most challenging, the most frustrating, but also the most rewarding and the most satisfying and the most creative and the most successful and the most just in any way that I could describe an ROI for my life personally and professionally, it's happened here. Now, not to say you can't go anywhere else and have similar experiences, but just something about this place that has demanded so much of me that I've enjoyed stepping into that calling. It's just shown me ways that I can dig myself out of a hole that I never thought possible. It showed me ways that I can create offers in my business, that I can help other people, that I can feel less restrained by maybe my community, my perceived societal norms, or even limiting beliefs from where I was living before, from the people that I had around me. It's just really anything and everything I think is possible here because there are so many different walks of life. People are crushing it in business and life, living out of a van down in Santa Monica or on the beach. People are downtown doing banking and tucking in their shirts and living that kind of 9-to-5 life a little bit. But there's just in everything in between. And I feel like the environment here has allowed me to kind of expand in ways that I never thought I could expand, or I never gave myself permission to. And just realize that I don't have to be one version of Chase. I don't have to be the professional. I don't have to be the coach. I don't have to be the podcaster. I can be me, and I can continuously, daily explore what it is to be Chase. And then I have outlets that are, okay, this is the version of Chase that this aligns with, or this is how I can create, or what I need to do, and how I need to kind of assemble my day or my life or my business to do this. But it's not me aligning in 100% as this identity. It's, I can just do this, and I can do that, but all while I'm just being me and continuously learning what I want and who I am.
Do you feel like there's one version that is the best, or you're constantly just changing things around, trying things on, and seeing what feels right, and not working to compare best, or even, ranking those versions of you? Or do you think that now in this present state, you're at your best because you're more open?
I think right now, where I'm at in my life is I'm finally, about 2 years ago, I became baseline Chase. And what I mean by that is I really understood where I was trying to be a version of myself that no longer served me, that I felt I had to, for whatever reason. It's, this person knows me as being this kind of Chase, or my audience knows me as being that type of Chase. Also, even just reflecting on life and realizing that, at that time I turned 35, and I just looked back to everything and really everyone that kind of poured into me and molded me in terms of my parents, my upbringing, being able to really reflect on all of the ways that I had become that version of Chase, and just face them all and just sorted out which ones that I wanted to keep and which ones that I was like, you know what, I don't need to hold on to that identity, or I don't even know why I have these rules about my life, or the way that I go about my business, or why I think or don't think a certain way. I should know why I do something or don't do something. So I just I questioned everything, and I just really learned how to change my mind and just live in the gray. And anybody that knew me before that, it's like this running joke. They would call me Officer Tuning or Sergeant Tuning. It was like, coming from the military, I was like, yes or no, right or wrong, moral, immoral, up, down, left, right. And I was like, you know what? There's a lot of potential if we just kind of bend or blur those lines a little bit, or even just allow space for what if, or allow space where we don't need a solution or an answer right now. What if I just kind of sat with it? What if I thought about it? What if I just put it on the shelf for a little while and came back? Like, I don't have to have a reason or an answer for everything right now. And I think that's hard for a lot of people, because it can induce anxiety. It can be like, I need a solution. I need something right now for reason A, B, and C. But I kind of really leaned into the gray, and that version of Chase emerged. And I feel like I now have just been really coming to terms and embracing that baseline. And now for the last 2 years, I've been building. So I feel like in many ways, I really only started living and working at age 35. And so now I feel kind of like a newborn. I'm a toddler now. 2-3 years later, I'm like, okay, cool. I got this.
Right.
This is my foundation. I'm growing here.
Or your third birthday this year?
Coming up on 3. Yeah, yeah. I'm like Benjamin Button in this thing or something.
It's wild to think about at 35, looking back at your life and questioning who you are and trying to establish a new identity almost. It sounds very overwhelming to...
It's crazy, right? Like, who does that?
Every thought you're, again, just questioning why you think that way, or all the relationships in your life. Is there anything that prompted that? Like, was it turning 35 that caused kind of this like reflection, or was it just kind of maybe a natural thing that you feel like you fell into?
Really good question. Oddly enough, I give a lot of credit. I don't know if credit's the right word. I think where I was and where we were, where the world was 3 years ago, especially being in Southern California and LA, in terms of global pandemic and the C word and lockdowns and restrictions and all of these things, LA got hit really hard. We had some of the wildest restrictions in terms of where you can and cannot go. who is allowed in, who isn't, anything and everything in between. And I'm not here to like pick sides or say one was right, or one was wrong, and then all of a sudden it would go away and then it would come back and like, you can do this now, but then the next week it was changed again. And so that was really wild to me, how in the local community level, but then federally, it just how fast we can go from one extreme to the other. And it just didn't make sense to me. So during that time, I began to kind of just literally look outside of my world and just be confused. And that ultimately led to me questioning a lot of things and just being curious as to, well, if they say this is right now, but then they say it's wrong or vice versa, who's right? Like, what's going on here? And so I think that for someone like me who was a rule follower and had so much faith and trust in the government and people so blindly, it really made me go, okay, Chase, like you should really kind of figure out where you stand because you're going to have to come face to face with it now in your daily life. Living in Los Angeles, you're going to interact with these things. It's inevitable. And so that was really kind of the biggest catalyst, just the pandemic. But then I kind of reached ahead of personal mental health work. In 2021, coming up on my birthday, I really was just beginning to think about, maybe it is, I was like, oh shit, now I'm getting past my mid 30s, going into my late 30s. And, as we kind of just, I think, go through life, every birthday, maybe you just kind of think about life a little bit more and more. And I had really come light years from where I'd been even just a couple of years ago in terms of my mental health around the death of my father. And I knew that there was just a little part of me that I need to really give it my all. I need to push a little bit harder. I need to get professional help. I need to expand the ways that I'm taking care of myself in terms of my mental health because I want to get over this. Yeah. I want to finally develop a relationship with that death, with that loss that doesn't continue to hurt me, that doesn't continue to limit me, that doesn't continue to not allow me to live my life the way that I want to, but damn sure the way that I know my dad doesn't want me to.
Right.
And so I dove headfirst into some really intense therapies, going back to therapy, working with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, and going through a good chunk of time of just the most intensive mental health work that I've ever done that I like, no shit, I say like literally saved my life. It's one of those things that showed me areas that I was still really holding on to fear, and got a diagnosis actually of PTSD from all of this. And just that showed me where in other areas of my life, it still had its chokehold on me. And it was just liberating. Right. And it was really difficult work that I went through for almost the next year. But the most important work that I've ever done. And so that coupled with, I think, all the changes that was happening in the world, really, I was looking at everything outside, then I was looking at everything inside. So then I finally kind of found this happy medium for my life.
Well, and just like a lot of things that I feel like people deal with later in life, it all starts in childhood or, when you're younger.
There's a lot in childhood we all could go back to.
Right.
Yeah. No matter your relation to your childhood, what you think is there or not there, we've got some things there that can probably help us.
And I imagine losing your dad was, if not the most traumatic thing to happen in your life, one of them.
Probably the most emotionally and mentally traumatic event in my life. I went through a really significant injury during my time in the Army. That was definitely the most physically traumatic event in my life, but they're kind of neck and neck. Yeah. Okay. They both are up there. Yeah.
And did you feel like you, Chase, 16 plus years ago, just didn't know or have the tools to handle it and work through it the way that you do now? And do you think that that was a product of your environment? I'm assuming being in the military, there are all these unspoken rules of masculinity and how you handle stress and how you handle challenges in front of you.
Yeah. Yes, or at least like that was my perceived reality. So I was in the Army from '03 to '09. And during that time,
That's a long time.
6 years active duty during OIF and OEF. And during that time, I hope it's gotten better, but it was definitely, hey, if you make it known that you're struggling mentally, if you seek this level of help that I thought that I needed, it could be really damaging to your career. Word travels fast. You could not get picked up for promotion. The work that I did was very high level in terms of intelligence work, security clearance. And if you have anything that's deemed not straight up here, that could be a big red flag. And so I didn't want to lose my clearance. I didn't want to be reclassed. I didn't want to be kicked out. I didn't want all these things that I had been working so hard to achieve. So whether that was real or not, I don't know, but that was my perceived reality. But, you know, actually, it's, when you kind of asked me if I didn't have the tools then that I have now, something maybe just think differently. Normally I would say, yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people would say. Oh, I didn't know how to do this then, or I didn't have the tools to better work on that the way that I do now. I think in my experience, once I discover what those tools are, once I have discovered what those tools are, it's really nothing that like past Chase could have discovered. It's just what was missing was the permission to myself to feel all of that, and the permission that I needed to actually get help, to just flat out ask for help. I could boil it down to, I did not ask for help. And asking for help, no matter where we are in our journey with a success or a big trauma, asking for help in any way is the thing we have to do so that we can learn the tools, develop the tools, keep the tools in our toolbox to work on that situation, but also for everything down the road. So yeah, it's not that I didn't have the tools. It's just I was too scared to ask.
So it was fear driven based on a career that you thought that you would have for probably the rest of your life, right?
Fear for that. And also I definitely was not ready to face that. It was easier for me. And I told myself that I have to shove this down because of my career and because of what I'm doing in the military. Also because of, I'm the oldest of three. My brother and sister, they need me. They need this version of me. So I can't show that I'm struggling because what if they're struggling more? I need to be there for them. I need to be there for my mom, my stepmom, my family. You know, my dad was really the glue that held our family and our small community together back home. And so, you know, but nobody asked me for that. I just kind of took it upon myself as probably a coping mechanism so that I didn't have to deal with my own shit.
It's an interesting thing diving into like actually feeling your emotions or embracing them. Because I have my own blocks to emotions, and a lot of that was based on like looking at my sister. She was a little bit more emotional. And so I was like, well, I want to be less that because that's a lot.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that was one of mine. But also I'm like, we never had discussions as a family or like with my parents about how I was feeling, you know? And I don't know if it would have helped. I'm not a childhood, you know, expert or anything, but like how many times do you have conversations around how you felt in a certain situation? I think even in relationships, I don't know if that's something that you have in your marriage of like, oh, like that made me feel a certain way. And like, how did you have that at the beginning of your relationship, or is that something that you've been able to cultivate now in this more mature stage of your marriage?
It definitely was called out of me, or I was called out. Definitely I was called out, but I didn't have it because so when I met my wife, for about the first couple of years, we were very serious very fast, but
this was after the military, right?
After the military. Yeah, I'd been out for a couple of years at this time.
Working at the clinic or?
So we met in school actually.
Okay.
So I met her, she was still wrapping up her degree in nursing, and I had just graduated from my undergrad program. She was a year behind me in school. And so we met, and then things got pretty serious. And then about 2 years into it, all along she knew there was definitely something that flat out I was hiding. And it was everything I just talked about.
The trauma.
It was me not dealing with this. And it became It became an issue for us because she knew how much of an issue it was for me.
Did you know?
No.
You were avoidant to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would bring it up every once in a while, but I would shut it down very quickly. And I had one of the worst panic attacks of my life one time with her. Like, she thought I was having a seizure, like almost called an ambulance, just like blacked out, severe panic attack, just hyperventilating, profusely sweating, just really, like, I had no idea where I was, what was going on, after she kind of revived me. And she's like, Jason, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Well, because she's a nurse too, so she
Absolutely.
has
She's
that.
like, yeah, code blue.
Yeah.
And all that was happening was we were watching a movie where there was a death scene, and they took this white sheet and kind of brought it up over the body. And it immediately took me back to when I watched them do that in the hospital with my father. And
Wow.
it was just a trigger for me, and I was gone. And when I kind of came to, she was glad that I was okay, but she was immediately very stern with me about, Chase, like, basically fix your shit. Like, this is not okay. It's not okay for you, in like a tough love kind of way. And it's weird. Sometimes, sometimes it takes a loved one in our life, or even a friend, or just somebody else other than ourselves, to choose to work on ourselves because we care more about that relationship than the one we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
And it clicked for me at that moment that she's not wrong.
Yeah.
I should work on this. I want to work on this, but I actually care more now about taking action on that, because if I don't, I could lose her. And that was more important to me than taking care of myself. So that tough love definitely, like, literally shook me to kind of take action. And that was the first time that I really ever regularly went to therapy. That's when I began all my kind of personal development, self-help work. I started journaling, started reading books about emotional intelligence and trauma and grief and self-help, and started listening to podcasts, and just, chose to lean into anything that I wasn't leaning into before about this area of my life and my history, and really, my health.
Yeah. A little bit of a loaded and probably like long answer for you, but when you look back at that time of your life, you're investing a lot more in learning and understanding yourself on a new level. Is there anything that sticks out to you now as like a pivotal realization, or just understanding of how like trauma works, or how, or even just like daily tasks that you do now that help relieve like your stress and emotional burden that you might be carrying around?
That's a powerful question. I think maybe a lot of people in your audience can relate to this. Both being fitness people, we care about movement and taking care of our bodies. I realized how much of my physical health, in terms of literally how I looked, my body, the type of training that I was doing, the numbers that I was hitting, my diet, my body composition, I realized how much of that was because of me running away from this traumatic event.
It was like you were trying to cover it up with doing something, as opposed to sitting with yourself and actually fixing the root of the problem.
Absolutely.
It was a Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to work on that hard stuff. Let me go as hard as I can in the other direction, and be as hard and work as hard in other areas. So if I become stronger, if I become leaner, if I become bigger, if I become healthier, if I become cleaner, then I should be cleansed of all that other stuff, right? No, absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. And it's wild. What's the best way to kind of share this? I firmly believe that there's a powerful mind-body connection.
Yes.
Not to get too bogged down in the weeds of that, but having that realization then, and then integrating mental and emotional health work with my physical self, my physical body, that work now for the past several years. When I really am conscious of that, and my mental health is being prioritized, and I maybe even have a breakthrough, or I let go of something that's been shackling me from the past, and now I've moved leaps and bounds past the death of my father, and to develop that better relationship with it. I have these releases in my body of breakthroughs that only come after the mental breakthrough. So, for example, I've just felt this lightness to my body. After I had these breakthroughs with my dad, I felt so much more comfortable in my body. I have developed such a much, not better, but different relationship to training in the gym. I stopped trying to just hit PRs all the time. I stopped training the way that everybody else was training just because it was the people around me.
Yep.
I now have a fully solidified why I train the way I do, how I want to move my body. I'm so much more in tune with my body. I've let go of needing to train for any other reason than just this is what I want to do. And I'm not running away from any other pain or any other hard thing anymore.
Yeah.
Also, with the physical injuries that I had in the military, long story short, torn hamstring, L4, L5 vertebrae basically went one way, and the rest of my back kind of went another way. Had both my femurs reconstructed, and I had to learn how to walk again twice. And so now, incorporating things like yoga and like daily just movement, physical activity and stretching, I have had these just releases from quite literally the sites of my injury and the surgeries and everything. Just these, just like energetic releases, or I just finally feel something set in my body. Like, oh, okay, well, like we're good now. Because I'm so much more conscious of going back to that period of my life and working through those emotions and memories, and I'm not holding on to them quite literally. My body is finally able to let go of that trauma, of those previous poor experiences with physical activity. I mean, no wonder I had all that caught up, because I was the most active I had ever been, and I suffered the most horrendous injuries I've ever been through. So of course my body is going to be like, hey, no, we don't want to go deadlift
we don't like that.
400, 500 pounds, because last time you tried to do anything physically demanding, we snapped up.
Yeah.
So once I've gotten through all that, I shit you not, I've been on the yoga mat sometimes, I've been in the gym, and it's just like, I feel like, oh, like, did I just get an adjustment, or was somebody doing deep tissue work on me or something? And I just, again, become lighter, and I feel so much more in tune to my body. And I, again, have a deeper, clearer reason as to why I train the way that I do, when I want to move my body, and how.
Do you have, this is something that I do with like my clients, do you have any non-negotiables for you, like on a weekly basis of like, in order for me to feel really good, I need to do X, Y, Z? Or is it really just a day-to-day checking in with yourself and assessing based on that? Or is it kind of like, okay, I know I feel really great when I do at least 20 minutes of walking in the morning?
I want to say yes to all the above.
Yeah.
And, right now I feel like on social media and in the world, if you don't have disciplined morning routine and non-negotiables and daily habits and evening routine, then what is you doing kind of thing?
Right.
And I definitely bought into that a lot. And not to knock discipline and not to knock your infrastructure and your non-negotiables, but I have introduced this whole new level of grace into my day and discipline that gets me where I want to go in terms of how I feel, my productivity, my business, my relationships, my everything. But I'm not so fixated on, you know what, I didn't hit 12,000 steps today. I didn't get a 90% or higher sleep score on my Whoop. I didn't do my morning walk. I didn't get 10 minutes of sunshine. I didn't chug the water. I didn't do all these things.
Right.
So I have non-negotiables. I have these things that I know serve me because I've gone through them many times, many years. I've whittled down the things that I can keep and things I can let go of. But I know they're there, and I know that should I want to go call upon them, they will serve me. But I don't need to always fit myself into that mold. To your point, especially if I'm checking in with my body, I maybe have quantitative biofeedback from a wearable or a smart device, or I'm just still long enough to go, all right, you know what? I'm feeling really, really strong. I'm feeling really restored. I'm feeling really tired. I'm feeling like maybe I shouldn't have had that beer last night. I'm feeling all these things. And so just introducing a pause long enough to just do a quick scan of where I'm at right now and what maybe led me to feeling so great or not so great. I then kind of build out, all right, this is what I need to do today.
Gotcha. So it's a feedback loop as opposed
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
here are my mandatory things that help me feel really good. It's like, well, no, some days I need those and some days I don't. And do you think that having been so disciplined in your past and then being injured and kind of having these moments of reflection of, hey, you can't do those things all the time. You think that's contributed to kind of where you're at now in your kind of, I hate to say fitness journey or whatever, but you know, and building a lifestyle that works for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be ignorant of me to say otherwise. I mean, absolutely. Every choice that I've ever made has led me to where I am now. Every choice that I aligned with, or every choice that I'm like, oh man, I wish I didn't do that, or wish I could go back and change. Everything has brought me to where I am now. So I believe that everything has served me to be able to make those choices right here, right now. The one kind of caveat I'll say is I think the one rule that I do still really hold on to, maybe two, is sleep. I prioritize sleep over everything because it has just yielded me the highest ROIs for the last 4 or 5 years now. And also, I just know me, after 2 days of not doing anything, like not going to the gym or at least not taking a walk, after 2 days,
You'll feel it.
I feel it. And I Chase, go to the stupid gym, do your stupid workout for your stupid health. Like, don't be so stupid. You know, I kind of have, not to be, you know, negative self-talky, but I just know, all right, that's kind of the most leeway that I want to give myself, because after that, I just feel like it's kind of a slippery slope. And I always go back to kind of my coaching practice of, you know, working with a client, and they go, man, I don't know. It's been 10 years and I haven't gone to the gym. I don't know what happened.
I got here,
That's how it happens. Giving yourself too much leeway in the things that you know serve you is where we begin to break promises to ourselves, and is where we really have no one else but ourselves to blame or to hold ourselves accountable for not feeling the way that we know that we can feel, or not having the life that we want to have, not being the example to our community, to our kids, getting on medication, becoming overweight, obese, becoming insulin resistant, having inflammation, you know, all of these chronic illnesses and diseases that are so preventable, are so treatable, and most are so reversible by just holding yourself accountable and having a small promise to yourself. In my example, it's just, okay, Chase, after 2 days, you got to do something.
Totally. Is there one specific health concern that you think about most often?
Ooh, yes. So in my family, we have quite a few diabetics.
Okay.
Now they're type 1. So out of the gate, I don't have type 1 diabetes, so I'm good there. But carbohydrates and excess sugars and monitoring my blood sugar, you know, I'm actually wearing a glucose monitor right now. I do this probably once, maybe twice a year for about a month, just kind of get a snapshot. I get my metabolic panel every year in my labs. That's always on my mind. I just want to, you know, I know this is in my family history, so I need to be a little bit more mindful of it. My lifestyle, my training, my diet, my sleep really helps mitigate that. The other thing, really, I think the biggest catalyst for fitness for me, besides my injuries and wanting to rehabilitate stronger, rehabilitate in a way beyond what the doctors told me was possible for me, was the death of my dad. Now, it was a terminal illness. It's not genetic. It's not hereditary. But, I mean, you lose a parent, you lose somebody so close to you in your family. It kind of makes you wonder, like, shit, am I going to get this? What's going to happen? That coupled with, so he had ALS, and there's a pretty gnarly statistic that being a male in the U.S. military, you automatically have a 30% higher chance of getting ALS, of dying from ALS. I shouldn't say get, but so, I mean, 30%, it's not crazy, but
that's pretty significant.
Hearing that and then having my father pass away from it is really close to home for me. So I definitely lean into that. You know, I know that I can't get it in terms of it's not contagious, or I can't pick it up from anybody, but sometimes a death, an injury, an illness at first is a fear to drive a healthy choice.
Yeah.
But that long term, unmanaged, like in my case, can become unhealthy.
Yeah.
You know, like again, I'll remind everybody, I was the strongest I had ever been, the leanest. I was killing it in my job. I had all these things, but I was breaking down internally. And I was suffering these crippling panic attacks and about to lose the most important relationship in my life. Like, who cares if you can PR every month? You know, if you can't keep the glue of your life together, that's when a reevaluation is necessary for the fears and the drivers in your life.
Right. So what do you do on a daily basis to maybe ease those concerns of, you know, being proactive towards preventing type 2 diabetes, or if there is anything that you can do habit-wise to prevent the onset of ALS, if that's even possible? I don't think so, but.
You know, I don't know this to be true. Maybe not yet, but having that fear has driven me to do all the things that I just said, but also has given me a strong interest in inflammation, neural inflammation, what we now call type 4 diabetes, such as Alzheimer's, dementia, things that we can trace back to poor nutrition choices, high sugar diets, high carbohydrate, high processed foods, ultra processed foods, things that we know cross the blood-brain barrier and prevent your brain from operating at peak efficiency, that even prevent neurons from talking together, firing together, wiring together. Because when we look at autopsies from people that pass away after having Alzheimer's, dementia, even neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS, we see all these things in the brain. So I'm not saying correlation is causation here, but in my mind, if I can adopt healthy habits day in, day out, like reducing processed foods, if not eliminating them entirely, keeping a pretty clean-ish diet. I'd say personally, I'm probably like that 80-20% guy. Doing things that actually increase brain health and decrease brain inflammation, neural inflammation.
Like exercise.
Like exercise, like a high healthy fat diet, high omega-3s. I incorporate daily and have for probably like 10 years now, functional mushrooms and adaptogens like lion's mane, reishi, medium chain triglycerides, omega-3s, things that actually, again, not only cross the blood-brain barrier, but have a positive experience. They have a positive experience or a result on the brain right then and there, but it doesn't stop there. Once you metabolize these things, you actually have positive kind of cascading effects long-term that we now know. We see that can be a prevention in things as Alzheimer's and dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases. So, you know, I'm taking care of my brain health in a big way. I'm taking care of my metabolic health in a big way, coupled with exercise and sleep. I think a blanket statement most people could benefit from, but also for me, that's, I think, the best path.
Yep. So with wearing your glucose monitor, have you noticed anything since putting it on of like, okay, maybe I should do this a little bit differently, or maybe I should not eat that, or maybe
eating a large pizza definitely causes a pretty high spike.
Shocking.
But I can't give up my pizza.
No.
So what I've noticed from this is that I actually don't, what's the best way to say this? There are a lot of things for most humans that will cause a really high blood sugar spike, which insulin spike. But that's kind of like what we're meant to do. That's the body's natural response to a lot of carbohydrate or glucose or fructose or any sugars coming in to release insulin to combat that, not have all these free-floating sugars all the time that would, you know, lead to inflammation, increased fat storage, becoming overweight, becoming insulin resistant. I found that most foods, most activities even are pretty true for me in terms of that spike, but my body does a pretty good job of mitigating that spike and you know, balancing back out pretty quickly. I haven't really found any surprising foods for me that keep that blood sugar pretty high. So again, I use it mostly as a snapshot, as a reminder, just like how every once in a while I'll go back to logging food. You know, I pick up my Fitness Pal. I just want to check in with myself. You know, even though working in the business for so long, and this is a part of my life at this point, I think many of us we can forget the fundamentals. of like maybe I'm really over consuming calories.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm under consuming. Maybe I barely hit 100 grams of protein. Maybe I'm actually eating a lot of foods that are secretly, silently kind of wrecking my metabolic health. And if I'm not wearing a glucose monitor, or maybe I'm someone who's not getting annual labs, baseline fasting glucose A1C, if I'm not getting any kind of snapshot, then again, I only have myself to blame. I only have myself to hold myself accountable for years down the road. God forbid something kind of pop up. So I've kind of found that it just helps kind of put me back on track. And it kind of reminds me that, all right, Chase, you actually have been having maybe some higher carb meals, or maybe your sweet tooth needs to be more at check. So it's just kind of like a good reminder and a little bit of a reset. It's kind of like putting bumpers back on my bowling alley of nutrition choices.
Yeah. Your lifestyle can become so mindless. You just kind of go from one thing to the next without really thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think with food, that's the easiest thing to be mindless about, and that bringing in a little bit more mindfulness with either tracking or checking your glucose every day or for a week or for a month or whatever. It just has that little bit of a mental hold on you of like, oh, before I do this, I have to log it. Or before I do this, you just have to be a little bit more attentive to what you're doing, which I think is really helpful for just continuing to curate a healthy and happy lifestyle. So we've talked about the health part of it. Is there anything that you do more regularly now to feel happy, but also like more fulfilled? Do you get a lot of that from your job? Do you get a lot of that from the relationships in your life? Like what's kind of helps fill your cup on a weekly or daily basis?
Two things really come to mind. One, weekly having long walks. Usually for me, that's Friday.
How long of a walk are we talking?
2, sometimes 3 hours.
Okay.
Usually it's at least an hour, kind of 40-ish, just kind of the walking paths that I find myself regularly taking. That's kind of like the time out, time back. I try to go for 2, sometimes maybe even as long as 3.
Do you pack water and like a snack?
No, I'm strategic. Maybe I'll make a pit stop. Okay, there's a smoothie shop maybe about halfway, or I'll grab an iced coffee or something. So I kind of strategically hit the spots that I like and, take a walk along the way. I love it, especially at the end of my week, because it kind of gives me a day off from the gym, because I love my Saturday workouts. I just love Saturday workouts. So I get a little buffer there. But also it allows me a really strong buffer time to detach from the week. Mentally, emotionally, physically. It allows me to just kind of slow down a little bit. I also just have so many amazing ideas. I kind of think back on the week of work, of life. I think about what's coming up on the weekend. It just introduces that necessary pause and barrier between work week and I really want to take some downtime. Maybe I need to work a little bit on the weekends, but it just inserts that kind of buffer a little bit.
I'm assuming these are silent walks.
I'm not, 9 times out of 10, I'm not listening to anything. I'm not listening to a podcast. I'm not listening to an audiobook. I may take a phone call here and there kind of thing, maybe. At most, I try to detach from technology as much as possible. But at most, I'll maybe whip out, kind of do some voice notes or something. Because I find myself to be very creative and ideas just flow, or a reminder will pop up. Excuse me. And I want to, okay, let me just remind myself about this. But that's it. I put my phone on, do not disturb or silent mode and just go do my thing. And then the second thing is I prioritize, again, usually on Fridays in real life. I call it IRL Fridays. So anybody maybe that is going to be like I want to meet up for consideration on the podcast, or a former guest or a friend, or just, friendship, professional friendship, whatever you want to call it. I try to meet somebody in real life. I kind of got my go-to spot, Dialogue Cafe, shout out Dialogue. I'm usually there, or I'll, if it's the first time meeting somebody in real life, as we all have internet friends now, I always try to go to them. I feel like it's kind of a good professional habit, maybe even networking hack, call it whatever you want. But by me saying, hey, what's a good time for you? I'll come to you. Do you have a favorite spot? I feel like that is just, I think it's a good move in the professional world. But it also just gets me out of my comfort zone. I mean, I'm a creature of habit. I love going to Dialogue. I love going to my same spots. I love all kind of like what's convenient for me. But I choose to get out of that convenience at least once a week, just gets me out of my routine, gets me to a different side of town, it gets me out of the house, kind of just gets things flowing in a different way. So
I think especially in LA, you feel confined to your space.
oh, you're in your bubble hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because just going anywhere is such a pain.
Yeah. Sometimes I kind of put my foot in my mouth and they're like, yeah, I'm up in the mountains in Topanga. I'm like, all right, cool. So this is going to be a 2-hour trip. But you know what? I love the mountains. It's beautiful up there. Let's go up. But
I live here. I have access to these places because I live here. And I'm sure rent's not cheap. So you might as well take advantage of your spot.
But then, like I said, really, I think it's a good move for anybody that's looking to maybe level up in their relationships, particularly their professional relationships.
Yep.
Take it off of them first. I'm not saying this is going to be a tit for tat kind of thing, but I just think it's a really good move that has served me well of showing that I am considerate, showing that I want to make things as convenient as possible for you, that I care enough about you and your time and your situation that I will come to you and we will meet at a place of your choosing at your time. And so hopefully that kind of sets the tone for the future of the relationship.
This feels like such a full circle moment because we talked about when you first moved here and you looked on Instagram and you're like kind of looking to like see who you could like connect with.
Yeah, truly. Yeah.
And you're so good at building a community. You're so good at connecting with people.
Thank you.
Obviously, you have a very successful podcast, and that's a good display of your ability to connect with other people.
That's all it is, really.
That's a great recommendation to put yourself out there to meet them first, like go to them first. Is there anything else that you feel like you do, whether you're aware of it or not, maybe that helps you with building community and building a business and connections?
Kind of to a fault sometimes, being so considerate of other people and so considerate of what they have going on that I kind of put myself on the back burner fairly often. But it's just, I realize that it's my nature and I can't
turn it off.
If you talk to me, Sam, about something you have going on and immediately I'm like, oh, there are 4 people, a person that I think at least y'all should know each other. Yeah. There might literally be some immediate help or some way y'all can come together on something. I can't not do that. Yeah. And again, kind of was saying earlier, sometimes I have to go back to like, no one asked for that, Chase. Right. When I think back to feeling the need to be called up to be the big brother, the man of the household after my dad passed away, whether it's from that or a combination of that or just, the leadership positions and experience that I had in the military. To your point earlier of kind of going back to childhood stuff, when I sat down, I was really, really thinking about this one day. I went back to, I was reverse engineering it basically. When I think it's a good practice for anybody when we're trying to understand why we do what we do and like what's the trigger for this thing. I was thinking about that and I went all the way back to not only just what are the other times that I do this, but when was the first time that I had this realization? And it brought me back to, no shit, my very first memory as a human being.
Which was?
I was maybe 4 years old, 3, maybe 4. And I'll never forget, it's clear as day. I was coming down the mountain. We were living with my grandparents at the time. And I came down the top of this trail overlooking the house. And I could see to the left, my mom and my dad, their backs to me were facing the back of the house, the creek there in our backyard. And I could tell that they weren't maybe arguing, but it wasn't like a hostile conversation, but I could tell things weren't all right.
Yeah.
And I began to kind of walk down, but I was hesitant to let them know I was there. And I just remember hearing these kind of like words of like, what are we doing? We don't have any money. There was like just confusion and frustration around finances. And then some other things, some family matters. And I just remember knowing that they don't see me. They don't know that I'm here. I can see them. I can hear them. I can also see my brother, my sister. I can see my grandmother. I can see all these other people. So I literally had the big picture. I had the big picture of what was going on, and I saw all the people that I cared about, and I wanted to help everybody. I wanted to connect these dots. I wanted to just, do whatever I could. Now, not to like psychoanalyze myself, but I do feel that was kind of what imprinted on me immediately to I can't not connect people. Right. I can't not.
It was how you started to see the world.
Exactly, yeah. So I see the big picture. in the world. I see the big picture in other people. And it brings me a lot of joy to just know that you're struggling with this one thing, and I know the person, or at least maybe know a couple people that might know the person that can help with that, because then that big picture helps everybody. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a rabbit hole, but I do think that's kind of what led me to what I do.
But even to put yourself in the position to know people, to connect other people, do you think that that's a personality trait of like you just enjoy meeting new people and putting yourself in new environments, or do you think that you work harder to accomplish that?
You know, I think a little bit of both, but majority, I definitely I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I have no problem talking at all. I'll talk to a stranger all day long. I just think the human experience is so fascinating, and most people have lived, you know, whether they realize it or not, pretty extraordinary lives. Everybody has gone through something. Everybody is going through something, but there's also a kind of a unique skill set or power that they have that maybe they don't see, that I'm like, oh, I want to see, I want to explore. And so I think that's what really helped me a lot as a coach, because I became more humanized to people as, you know, hey, I'm another human, another person here that wants to just hear what you have going on, what you're struggling with, not the coach or the trainer that's like, all right, yeah, you're a piece of shit. Here's your program. You need to stop doing this, start doing that. Get off kind of that pedestal and just be a present human being for somebody that really needs it at that time. So I love connecting with other people. And then I love building this thing, you know, this podcast, you know, diving into social media and diving into just the infinite potential that we have right now in the world of making that a thing. And podcasting has been an amazing outlet to continue my knowledge and to keep learning how to be better, stronger, internally, externally, all these things, but then to share that with the world and then stay connected to the people that I bring on the show, case in point here, and then, you know, bring everybody together.
Yeah. I mean, it goes to show that obviously you've been able to be as open as you have been, probably because you do podcasting, you're meeting new people all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And if you didn't have an open mind, like how different would the podcast be, right? Like how it would, I mean, you probably wouldn't have as many of the variety of people that you have on your podcast. But for the sake of time, because I know you got a lot going on, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with? Is there any, I mean, Ever Forward is your slogan, your motto.
Yeah, that's kind of the obvious, I guess.
But where can people find you? Is there any last bit of advice, or even just anything you want to leave everybody with?
So they can definitely connect with me at Ever Forward Radio, anywhere that you enjoy podcasts.
Apple, Spotify,
everforwardradio.com. You know, we're everywhere. And then, so I say that the podcast is like the long format place where all of that stuff lives, of what I'm really diving into, what I'm exploring more, what's helping me live a life ever forward, and hopefully others. And then on Instagram is where I kind of, the day-to-day, like, no curtains, full, this is my life experience, this is what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, what I'm trying, products, services, habits, lifestyle, all that stuff. I guess one thing I'll leave everybody with beyond that, kind of a new catchphrase or mantra, if you will, is that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And it's kind of like the polar opposite to Ever Forward. But when we really just take a moment to just, okay, be here, be where your feet are.
Right.
Be where your feet are. What got you here? What is keeping you here? Do you want to stay here? What is keeping you from moving forward? And acknowledging the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in the present moment. Maybe you really hate your circumstances. Maybe you're very unhappy in your life, your job, your body. Maybe you're extremely happy in all the above. But if we kind of take that moment and take that ownership of, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I think the next steps become clearer, or at least the next step. So the best way that I have found to move forward in life, to keep moving ever forward, is to just acknowledge that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and everything just becomes clearer, or at least one thing becomes clearer that I need to do next, or that I want to do next, that I choose to do next.
Love that. Like, this is what you need right now. This is what you need, whether you like it or not.
Or this is what I already have.
Yeah.
This is what I'm taking for granted.
Yep.
Or this is what I'm ignoring. This is what I'm not honoring. All the above.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah, this is great,
because I
Sam.
feel like
Thank you so
we could have
much.
gone on for hours. But thank you so much for giving us your time and
pleasure.
sharing your story. And I'll see you, I'm sure, very soon.
Yeah, this is so cool. We're coming up on our friend anniversary.
Yeah.
Like 5 years, yeah.
I guess coming in like October, November?
I think, about
Maybe?
October.
Is
Yeah,
that
we
when
got
you guys-
settled in September 18.
Yep.
And then I think I started blowing you up in October.
Wild. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy how
This is
things
great.
go.
Thank you,
Love it.
Sam.
Awesome. Thanks, Chase.